Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second in the mini-series of the mid-season review of the F1 2014 season. We're going to go on to the second one now, which is looking at the only other team on the grid apart from Caterham to have not scored points, and that is Sauber, which is amazing to think that Sauber haven't scored any points this year, considering how well of a season they had in the last 2 seasons at least anyway. This year they retained the services of Esteban Gutierrez, who had quite a difficult first rookie season, I think, but it looks like he justified himself to get into the team for a second season in a row. And he also brought in Adrian Sutil, who was with Force India last year, who's a man of experience. He's driven for all sorts of teams from Spiker to Force India, and this year he's moved over to Sauber. We start off with Australia, where all the teams for this season didn't know where anyone was really placed, and Sauber were able to get themselves 11th and 12th at the end of that race, and no one really knew where Sauber were in terms of performance. They knew they were ahead of the new teams and Lotus and possibly even Toro Rosso, but not during the race, sadly enough, and from there on the rest of the season got much more trickier. A double retirement within the space of 3 laps of each other at Malaysia, both of them having Sutil with a power unit problem and Esteban Gutierrez having a gearbox problem which ceased 3 laps after Sutil's problem. Again in China they didn't show really any signs of anything. They both had accidents in the Chinese Grand Prix, and it wasn't a good start to the season with just two finishes rather out of a possible 6, and they made the worst start to the season out of any of the teams. And sadly, it wasn't really to get any better from there, as I've already mentioned. An amazing crash between Esteban Gutierrez and Pastor Maldonado at the Bahrain Grand Prix, which was just incredible when you see it. The way that Gutierrez was flipped over, and that was a bizarre crash. I've never seen anything like that, except now that we've seen it twice this season with 2 different drivers. We move further on to the Spanish Grand Prix, where both Saubers managed to finish a race this time, but nowhere near the pace. I mean, they both got out finished by the Lotuses, who had shown signs of recovery but were still comparatively slow, and Sauber were just the best of the established teams. They were comfortably ahead of Russia and Caterham at that point, but it didn't seem as if they were going really anywhere. It didn't look like they were moving forward in any way, shape or form. And Monaco further compounded that with Sutil crashing out, and Gutierrez was running in 8th place at one point, and Sauber were looking to as if get their first point of the season, which would have been a big deal for Sauber, but sadly maybe fatigue got the better of Gutierrez, and he spun and clipped the corner at Raskas, and that finished off any chances that Sauber had of getting points at that race. And the same again really in Canada. Gutierrez had more problems, and Sutil was just slow. He actually finished behind Perez and Massa, who both actually crashed out on the second to last lap, and it doesn't show any signs really of getting any better at that point in time. As they moved on from Canada, a race of attrition, to another track in Austria, which was a Mercedes benefited track. Austria had every single Mercedes powered car apart from Jenson Button was in the top 10, and Ferrari's engine was really shown to have not really any pace here. It was reliable, but the Renaults proved not to be reliable, and they were the lowest of the Ferrari in the Ferrari versus Renault battle, but Sauber really struggled because of that, and Sutil managed to finish 13th. Gutierrez finished 19th. He had his problems, but again, Sauber were beaten by Lotus again, who had a really bad season so far. And after that, we moved on to the next round, which is the British Grand Prix. And Sauber were, well, firstly, Gutierrez had an accident in the first place with Pastor Maldonado, which caused him to go out of the Grand Prix. Maybe a form of payback after what Maldonado had done to Gutierrez at the Bahrain Grand Prix, but it didn't appear that way in the end, and Gutierrez came off worse because of it, and Sutil had got another 13th place, but again got beat by the Lotus of Grosjean, which is starting to show now because the Lotus is getting quicker and quicker, and at the start of the season, that's who Sauber were battling against. And they were beaten again at German Grand Prix, which is Sutil's home track, and he wasn't able to put into a performance. He was running quite well until he spun on the final corner, and Gutierrez was only able to finish 14th. So again, not a good start for Gutierrez, although he did climb 3 places after that collision that he had with Maldonado in the last Grand Prix from the start. It's not showing good signs. But this Grand Prix, the most recent Hungarian Grand Prix, Sauber really showed probably the best performance to date, despite that Gutierrez retired with an ERS problem. Sutil was pushing the McLaren of Jenson Button all the way to the end, and only ended up finishing 0.9 of a second behind them, just less than a second behind of a point scoring position. And it was a real shame really, because Sutil had driven quite well up until that point, managed to keep out of trouble during the wet, and Sutil being a wet weather specialist, you kind of expect that from him. It's hard really to sum up Sauber's season. I know that they were definitely not expecting to have a result like this, or a season like this in fact, and to be 10th, only ahead of Caterham because of positions, and they're only ahead of Caterham because they've had more 11th places. Bear in mind, Caterham have had 1. I think I'm right in saying that Sauber have had 2 at the start of the season and at Hungary. So, I mean, if there are any more problems for Sauber and Caterham managed to get in a race of attrition, Sauber could end up looking at the finishing last. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think Sauber probably will score points eventually at some stage in the season, but they are not having the season they were expecting by any standards, and hopefully their season will end up proving to be a little bit better as we move on into the next set of races.